nursing, okay, when we talk about oncology nursing, okay, so always remember that what we are going to talk about would now be the cell, correct? Yes. Always remember that your cell, syempre, we need to go back to the basic anatomy and physiology first for you to be able to understand more about your cell, okay? About your cancer, okay? Now, when we talk about now your oncology nursing, we're actually talking about the cell. So, your cell is just like a bread. Always remember that your bread has an outer covering. So, if we're going to talk about the cell, this is now what you call as your cell membrane. Okay? Membrane. Is your cell membrane very much important? Okay? Part of your cell. Yes. Your cell membrane would now be separating this cell, okay, from the entire population of the cell. That's why it is very much important that you have the cell membrane. Okay? So the cell membrane is the outer covering that would now be protecting this cell from all those types of cells. Clear? Okay. So it simply means one thing, that this cell has its own individuality. So just in case something happened to this cell, okay, at least this cell alone would now be having the problem and not other cells as well. Correct? So it has its own individuality. Now, when we talk about now the cell, okay, we do also have now our spread, di ba? What I have said is that your cell is just like a bread. It has an outer covering called now your cell membrane. And when we talk about a bread, we need to put the spread, di ba? Mga palaman. So what are those spreads that I'm going to talk about? Those are what you call as your organelles. Okay, organelles, okay, inside the cell. Those are the parts that would now be making up the entire cell. So, when we say the organelles, mga palaman yan spread inside the cell. Okay? And I have to first discuss the most important part of your cell, which is now your nucleus. Okay? Always remember that your nucleus is the first organelle that I'm going to talk about. Nucleus. Okay? Is this your brain of the cell? Yes or no? Yes. Okay, always remember that this is so important because it houses now the factory inside the cell. The factory inside the cell is now what you call as nucleolus. Nucleolus. When you say nucleolus, it is actually a small dot inside the nucleus that will now be serving as a factory inside the cell. A factory inside the cell. Okay? Factory of what, sir? When we talk about the nucleus, this would now be the factory or the maker of two important protein substances. When we say protein substances, we're talking about your RNA, okay, your ribonucleic acid, and your DNA. Your deoxyribonucleic acid. Okay? Now, why is this so important, sir? Okay, always remember in the actual concept of oncology nursing, your RNA and DNA would now be having a function such as the RNA becomes now the hardware maker of the cell, which means this would now be creating the parts of the cell. Whereas your DNA, when you already have your hardware, your DNA would now be serving as the software of the hardware. Okay? So meaning that the DNA would now be the one to put now the functions in that hardware. Ibig sabihin, if I already have a part and then I need a software so that that part would now have its function. So for example, the RNA would now be building the part just like now your endoplasmic reticulum, your Golgi apparatus, okay, your Golgi apparatus, and then your mitochondria, and then your vacuole, your peroxisome, lysosome, and your lysosome, peroxisome, correct? Yes, and secretory vesicle. Now, when we talk about now the hardware, always remember after you have created now or after the RNA would have created now the parts, what happens now is that your DNA will now be embedded so that this would now have its function. So for example, we have mentioned that this is now your endoplasmic reticulum. Reticulum. Okay. Once this is already created, now the DNA would now be embedding itself for this to have its function. Oy, thank you, Angela. You already turned on your camera. Okay. So Oh, for example, this endoplasmic reticulum. So the DNA will be embedded and then this would now be having its own function. So what will now be the function of your endoplasmic reticulum or also known as your ER? Remember this that this would now be serving as the pathways, okay? Pathways of all RNA and DNAs. Now, coming now from your nucleus. So that just in case that the RNA will be needed by other parts of the body, other parts of the cell, it can now transport the RNA so that you can now create another parts of that certain specific site of the cell. Correct? So it means that this would now just be serving as a pathways. Clear? The endoplasmic reticulum. Again, what will now be the pathways of of the cell? This will now be the endoplasmic reticulum. And what does it transport? It transports the RNA that will now be needed for the creation of another parts outside the cell or inside the cell. Clear? Now, when we talk about now our RNA, always remember, do you agree guys that this is very important? Yes or no? Yes, this is also very important because without your RNA, you will not be able to important. You will not be able to create another parts of the cell. That's the main reason why God created a refrigerator for this, a storage box for this. This is now what you call as your Golgi apparatus. Golgi apparatus, okay? Or also known as Golgi bodies. Remember that this would now be serving as a refrigerator. Refrigerator of what? Storage box of what? Storage box of what? Of your stored RNA. Correct? Yes, because whenever we create something that is very important, isn't it that we want to keep that just in case that we have an excess? We want to keep it. We want to keep it so that for the later use, we can still utilize this just in case that we'll be needing that. Correct? Yes. Now, when we talk about now the next part, okay, the next part would now be your, okay, your mitochondria. Mitochondria. Chondria. When we talk about the mitochondria, on the other hand, would now be, sabi niya, the RNA will be creating the mitochondria. This is a sausage-like substances, correct, inside the cell. And always remember that your mitochondria will now be placed the function by your DNA, and what will now be the primary function of your mitochondria. This would now be serving as your powerhouse of the cell. Powerhouse of the cell. Why do you think that this is a powerhouse of the cell? Because it contains now the battery, okay, inside every cell. Ibig sabihin, if we're talking about a cell phone, it contains the lithium ion. Okay, lithium battery. Parang ganun siya. Why? Because it houses now the primary electrolyte that contains now the energy. And what is the primary electrolyte that has the energy in it? It's what you call as your phosphate ion. Phosphates. Clear? So ibig sabihin, every time that your phosphate is around the body, automatically you will be having an energy because it contains power. Correct? Yes, it contains power, it contains energy. And remember, in terms of phosphate, this is actually what you call as your adenosine triphosphate that will be housed now inside the mitochondria. Clear? Clear. Okay. Now, next thing. Sorry, paulit po ng phosphate. Okay. Again, when we talk about the phosphates, always remember the phosphate is the primary element or primary element that would now be the main source of energy of all living material. This would now be the main source of energy of all living materials. Ibig sabihin, for as long as you have now your mitochondria, always remember, yes, ribosomes is actually your RNA. RNA ribosomes din po yun. Okay. Yes, RNA is also ribosome. So, ibig sabihin, your ribosomes are just your free-flowing, transported towards the endoplasmic reticulum RNAs. Ibig sabihin, yun yung mga naka-attach na RNAs in your endoplasmic reticulum. Yes, you're correct. Okay. Now, when we talk about now this phosphate, again, let's just go back to the mitochondria. Always remember it would now be housing the phosphate. That's the main reason why for as long as a living organism contains now mitochondria, they already have the power. And remember, every time that you eat something that is with living material, okay, living material, automatically it would now give you energy. Correct? Because you're also eating its phosphate. Clear? Clear? Okay. Now, and then another thing that would now be created by your RNA would now be what you call as the vacuole. Okay? What do you think is the main reason why God created the vacuole? So that this would now serve as a fluid reservoir and electrolyte reservoir of the cell. And what does this do is that okay, what does this do is that it would now make the cell a little bit fluidy. Okay, a little bit fluid. Clear? So that it's not dry. So ibig sabihin siya yung taga-dilig. Taga-dilig. Okay? It would now water the entire okay cell. Clear? Now, another thing is that there's also some important parts that God has created. And this is what you call as your actually this would look like the same. It's just that it has a different function. This is now what you call as your peroxisome. Okay, peroxisome. Peroxisome. You do also have now your lysosome. Lysosome. And you do also have now your secretory vesicle. Secretory. Okay, vesicle. Okay, so these are the some of the most important microorganelles that I'm going to talk about. Okay? Always remember, this is now what you call as the microorganelle. Bakit microorganelle? Because these are very small, okay, and they look alike. Okay? They look alike one another. So meaning magkakamukha sila organelle. Okay? Microorganelles that will now be playing a vital role when it comes now to an invader. For example, when we talk about now your peroxisome, okay, the peroxisome would now, every time that you say peroxisome, say this class, peroxisome, peroxisome, peroxide, correct? So every time that you think about your peroxisome, it contains now your hydrogen peroxide. Okay? So your hydrogen peroxide, hydrogen, okay, peroxide. Okay, when we talk about the hydrogen peroxide, always remember that this can now disinfect. Tama ba yon? This can now disinfect. This can now disinfect. Okay. Okay, this can now disinfect anything that would now enter the body. Correct ba yon? Yes. So for example, you have now a problem when it comes now when you have now a problem now when it comes now to the invader. So a virus, a bacteria, or anything that would now be entering that cell will now become disinfected without killing the entire cell. And that is actually the main purpose of your peroxisome. Clear? So parang disinfectant lang siya. Clear? Disinfectant. Okay, sige. Medyo mabilis. Sige, bagalan po natin. When we talk about the lysosome. Okay, guys, when we talk about the lysosome, okay, when we talk about the lysosome, this is actually what we call as DT. Okay? Okay. So, what do you mean by DT? This is what I call as dakilang tanga. Okay? So, dakilang tanga. Why? What do you, why the great, okay, the great tanga daw. Okay. Why? Because, you know why? Why I call this as dakilang tanga? Because it would kill itself so that everyone will live. Okay? So it can kill itself so that everyone else will live. Ibig sabihin, may pagka-martyr. Okay? May pagka-martyr si lysosome. Why? Because it contains now lyso. Okay, think about this. May lason. Okay, that lason, that poison inside now the lysosome, poison inside that lysosome, this is now what you call as your lysosomic enzyme. And when we talk about that lysosomic enzyme, always remember that when this will be released, Okay, by your lysosome, what happens now? It's going to spread out in the entire cell so that it would now kill that cell. So for example, something happened towards your cell. So for example, there's a mutation of the cell. Oh, sabi mo, there's actually 2 mitochondria, or there would now be 2 nucleuses or 3 nucleuses. There would now be a lot of endoplasmic reticulum that will be created because of mutation. Does this look like an abnormal or normal to you? Abnormal. So when you have now an abnormal thing that will be happening inside the cell, so what will happen? The lysosome will burst itself so that the poison will be released and that cell that has an abnormality will be killed. Ang tawag po natin doon, apoptosis. Ibig sabihin, is your apoptosis a programmed cell death? Yes or no? Programmed cell death. Yes or no? Yes. When we say programmed cell death, always remember the main reason why your cell are killing itself because it has to be killed, because or else there might be some problems that might arise someday. Okay, most especially if this abnormal cell will multiply. So do you think lysosome is as a very important part of the cell? Yes. And once the lysosome will be deactivated, what do you think will happen to the cell? Will the cell still die? Can the cell still die if the lysosome will be deactivated? No, the cell will not be able to die anymore. Clear? And that's when a cancer cells will occur. Clear? Clear po tayo doon? Okay. And lastly, you have now the secretory vesicle. When we talk about the secretory vesicle, this would now be the door. Door lang po yan. Door so that whenever there would now be someone who wants to enter or something who wants to enter or something would want to come out, for example, the nucleic acid would want to come out, or some ATP would now want to come out, or some RNA would now to come out, or a bacteria would want to come in. Okay, it would just be serving as a door. And it would now be serving as the one that would now make the cell permeable. Permeable, semi-permeable, semi-permeable. Okay, when you say semi-permeable, it would now be a selective. Okay, selective to what's going to enter that cell, or non-permeable. Non-permeable. Clear? Am I clear? Yes, okay. Let me just repeat everything that I have just mentioned. Okay. Remember, just repeat after me, ha? Okay. If you can answer back. Okay. Every time that we're going to talk about oncology nursing, we're actually talking about the cell, correct? Do we have the outer covering of the cell? Yes. And what do you call that then? Okay, the cell membrane. Is the cell membrane the one that that's going to separate this cell from entire population of the cell? Does that mean that your cell has an individuality? If something's go or wrong inside that cell, can that be separated from another type of cell? Yes. Can that infect another cell if it has a cell membrane? No. Now, question: what is now the brain of the cell? The nucleus. Why is it so important that you have the nucleus? Because it houses the factory. What do you call the factory then?
Nucleus.
Okay, nucleolus. And remember, the nucleolus would now be creating 2 types of protein substances. That is now what you call as what? RNA and DNA. Okay, which part of the RNA, between the two would now be creating now the parts of the cell? RNA. And what will now be giving the function of the cell?
DNA.
Or the DNA. And remember, when we talk about the endoplasmic reticulum, what will now be its function?
Pathway.
Okay. Is your RNA very much important? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. If just in case we have an excess of that RNA, since it's important, do you want to waste it?
No.
That's the main reason we're going to store it in a storage box. What do you call that storage box? Golgi apparatus. And remember, do you think the cell needs to have power in it? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. If the cell needs power in it, where is the power being stored?
Mitochondria.
Okay, what is the primary element, okay, or electrolyte that would now be the main primary source of all power of all
Phosphate.
living material? The
ATP.
phosphate in terms of adenosine triphosphate. Remember? Yes. Okay. When we talk about now your vacuole, always remember this would now be making the cell a little bit fluid. Correct? Yes. And is this the fluid center or the electrolyte center of the cell? Yes or no? Yes. And remember, which disinfects the one that's going to enter that cell? Is it the peroxisome, lysosome, or secretory vesicle?
Peroxisome.
Peroxisome. Once the peroxisome would now be functioning, automatically, will the cell die or not?
No.
No, it will just kill the invader, correct? And when we talk about the lysosome, just in case the lysosome would now be activated, will the cell die or not?
Die.
Guys, so do you agree, guys, that when we talk about the lysosome, is it one of the most important part of the cell? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. Can that lead towards now the program cell death?
Yes.
If you have now the program cell death, is that what you call as your apoptosis? If you have now your apoptosis, will you be creating cancer?
No.
No, wala, because the cell will die already. Correct? And of course, what would now serve as a door?
Secretory
Oh,
Vesicle.
yun lang naman. Can I proceed to the next one? So what I want you to emphasize in here is that the nucleus is a very much important. It was actually asking from the exam. Another is the role of your nucleolus, and of course the DNA and RNA. Plus, I want to emphasize your dakilang tanga or the lysosome, the hero, di ba? The martyr hero, correct? Yes. Okay. Can I proceed to the next one? Because I want to discuss something to do with your RNA and DNA. Because your RNA and DNA are all codes. Remember, the codes that would now be creating the parts and the codes that would now be embedding the function. So, ibig sabihin, we have codes, okay? And that codes is actually created, okay, in terms of your nitrogenous substances. Nitrogenous substances. Clear po tayo doon? Okay. Now, ganito. When we talk about now, the next thing, what I'm going to talk about now would now be the role of your RNA and DNA. The main reason is because it contains now all the codes. And remember, when we talk about the DNA versus now the RNA, okay, remember that it contains now the codes. And when we talk about the DNA, always remember this is also known as your deoxyribonucleic acid. And what is the main role? To embed the function, correct? Or to create the software, correct? Yes. And when we talk about the RNA, always remember that this would now be serving as what? Your parts. It would now be creating the parts. And of course, it would now be creating the hardware. Correct ba yun? Yes. Inulit ko lang po. Now, question. What do you think is the composition of now your DNA and RNA? Okay. This is how it looks like under the electron microscope. Okay. In the DNA first, we have now what you call as your sugar carbon. Okay. You have the sugar carbon. Okay, you have the sugar carbon, which is the backbone of all RNA and DNAs. Okay, backbone yan. Parang yung spine niya. And then you will now be having now one phosphate ion. When we talk about the phosphate ion, again, what's the role? To give power. Correct? And of course, you do now have phosphate ion, and you do have now what you call as your nitrogenous substances. Nitrogenous substances. Okay? When we talk about the nitrogenous substances, you have 4 nitrogenous substances under DNA. These are your, what you call as your adenine, okay? Your thymine, your cytosine, and of course, your number 4, guanine. Okay? So, remember that what I've mentioned is that these are just codes. So let's just put it a code for this. So adenine, let's put A for that. Your thymine, let's put T for that. Your cytosine, let's put C for that. And your guanine, let's put G for that. Clear? And remember that your nitrogenous substances are usually, or not usually, are actually comes by base pair. When you say base pair, it should always have its partner. So for example, always remember that your thymine will only be partnering with your adenine, and your cytosine will always be partnering with your guanine. So for example, if this would now be your DNA, look at this, guys. If this would now be your DNA, this would now be your sugar carbon, the phosphate ion, and then you have the letter A in here, adenine. What would now be the partner? Letter T. Correct? And there would now be another phosphate ion, and there would now be another sugar carbon. That's how you look. That's how your DNA would look like. Clear? So ibig sabihin, when you create now one strand of this DNA, this is now what you call as your nucleotide. Nucleotide. And if you have so much of that, so for example, marami ka na niyan, okay? So for example, you have now letter C in here. So what is the partner of letter C? Letter G in here. Then another phosphate ion, then another sugar carbon, then another letter T in here. The partner of letter T is letter A, and then another phosphate ion, and then the sugar carbon. Correct? So ang tawag naman dito, if you have created so much of those are now what you call as polynucleotide. Under the electron microscope, what you can now see is just like this one. Para siyang ganyan, naka-strand. Clear? So ibig sabihin, do you agree with me that it's now a double helix strand? Double helix strand ba siya? Double helix strand? Yes. When you say double helix, it has now two backbones. Two backbones, the left and the right. Correct tayo doon? Yes. So meron tayong dalawang backbones. And always remember, when we talk about those codes, those are the codes now that would now be giving the function. Siya yung magsasabi why you have your black hair, why you have your black eyes, why you have, why are you tall, why are you short, why are you like this, why are you like that. There would now be always the question why. It's going to answer why. All the questions about the whys in your life. Diba? So ganun na, about your structure, about your appearance, about your physical attributes. It's going to answer all the whys. But when we talk about now our RNA, remember again, what's the function of your RNA? It's going to create the parts. It's going to answer the question, what's going to be created? What's going to be created? Clear? Kasi nga, parts ang tinatanong. But why is that part going to function like this? It's going to be answered by your DNA. Kasi why nga ang question. Clear? Sige. So, sige nga, I will be showing you how your RNA would look like. This would now look like, you also have one sugar carbon, and then you have one phosphate ion, and then you have another. Okay, always remember, you have another 4 nitrogenous substances. So just like your DNA, it also has its own nitrogenous substances. Okay, so what are those nitrogenous substances, guys? So you have now your adenine. Okay, so you have now your cytosine. You have now your guanine. And of course, okay, is there something missing from versus the DNA? Yes. And what is that? Your thymine. The thymine will be replaced by uracil. Clear? So meaning, remember, these are still just codes. So when we talk about the codes, you have now A for adenine, U for uracil, cytosine is C, and guanine is G. Clear? Clear ba? Yes. Now, question. Just in case now that this comes by base pairs, always remember that A now will be partnered by U. And your C now will be partnered by G. Clear? Still, the C will be partnered by G. If just in case you'll be seeing this under the normal microscope, in the electron microscope rather, always remember that this is how it looks like. You have now your sugar carbon. You have now your, again, phosphate ion. This would now serve as an energy. And you have now your nitrogenous substances. For example, you have letter U in here. So what will now be the partner, guys? Letter A. And then there would now be another phosphate ion. And you know what? What's missing with your RNA is that there's no another backbone at the end. Ibig sabihin, when we talk about now, ganun lang natin ha, wala. Wala. There's no next backbone. There's no another sugar carbon. That's the main reason why if you're going to take a look at this, there would now be another polypeptide chain, correct? So for example, this is A, this is U, this is another phosphate ion. If there would now be another sugar carbon, there would now be another phosphate, another T. Then what comes next? There would now be another, there's no T. There's another C, rather, okay? And there would now be a partnering of letter G. Remember, there's no there's no T because we're talking about the RNA. Tama? Yes, okay. And there would now be another phosphate ion. Again, wala po tayong another backbone. Okay? That's the main reason do you believe that this is a single helix strand. What you can see under the electron microscope is a single helix strand. Single helix strand. Correct? How come that this can stand, sir? Okay. How come that this RNA can still stand without having now two backbones? There's only one backbone eh. So how do you think this would now be able to stand? Remember, God has placed some oxygen ions beside it. Remember that there would now be two oxygen ion per strand so that it will be able to stand. Kaya nga, when we talk about now the RNA, is this what you call as double oxygenated strand? Oxygenated strand. Yes. And do you think that DNA would also have its own oxygen? Of course, it would also serve as an energy for the strand. That's the main reason that God only put one oxygen per strand. Clear? So remember, in the DNA, you only have one oxygen ion. Oxygen ion. Clear? Yes. Which is two oxygenated? Two oxygen ions. Okay, so that will now be your RNA. And what is now the one oxygenated ion? Okay, so that will now be your DNA. And always remember that this would now be creating your single helix strand, that's your RNA, and double helix strand, that would now be your DNA. All of them are all of them will be having now your four nitrogenous substances. It's just that the other one does not contain the thymine. Which is that? Which one of that does not contain thymine?
RNA.
Okay, the RNA. Which one contains uracil?
RNA.
RNA.
Which one contains now your adenine?
Both.
Both, di ba? Oh, that's the main reason why you need to memorize that. You know why? Because in the local boards, it's actually being asked. In NCLEX, it's not going to be asked anymore. Okay, international, you will not be asked with that. Yes, same din po ba yung tawag sa RNA na nucleotide and polynucleotide? Yes, same din po. Per strand, okay, of RNA or DNA is what you call as nucleotide. Okay? Or multiple RNA and DNA strands are what you call as polynucleotide. Clear? Strand yun eh. Tama? Okay. Sir, bakit po ulit double oxygenated? Actually, the RNA, we just created some story okay, behind it. Okay? So, since the RNA does not have your another backbone, it does not contain the sugar carbon at the end, So, we just assume that God created God placed two oxygenated ions, okay, per strand so that it can stand. Clear? So, para it's easier to memorize. Kasi in real life scenario, okay, there's no such story. It's hard to memorize, tama? Kasi the book will just be telling you what are the components of RNA. That's it. Correct? There's two oxygen ion, there's one oxygen ion, there's double helix strand, there's adenine, there's thymine, there's uracil, there's cytosine. Correct? Yes. You know what the exam is really particular about? It's not really the physiological aspect or the anatomy aspect of that RNA or DNA. But actually, it's codes. Ito po, dito po tayo magko-concentrate for all those codes. Clear? Because those codes should come by base pairs. Clear ba tayo doon? Yes. And anything that would now, change that code to another thing, okay? So for example, a problem might arise. Example po ng problem natin ha. For example, you were exposed with alpha, beta, gamma, X-ray, or UV rays. So if you will now be exposed, okay, in such radiation, in such culprit or risk factors, what's going to happen with one of the nitrogenous substances? What's going to happen is that it's going to change its code. Yung letter T gagawin niyang letter G. So now question, is your A already a partner of letter G? Can it be partnered to letter G? No, it cannot be partnered to letter G. Kaya nga, you call this as your faulty pairing. Faulty pairing. Clear? And when do you usually would now have faulty pairing? If you will be exposed to risk factors. If something has changed inside the body. Anything that deviates from normal anatomy and physiology, it can easily change a code inside the cell. Tatandaan mo ha, remember yesterday or the other day, what I have mentioned is that everything that deviates around the body, anything that deviates, nakita ko ngayon, sinulat nyo pa, anything that deviates from normal, anything that deviates from normal anatomy, what happens to the cell? Okay, what happens to the body? It would now undergo stress response. What else? Inflammatory conditions, inflammation, and lastly, changes of codes. Correct? O, nandito na tayo sa third part. Correct? Yes. So, remember, what are those codes ba? Okay, ganito lang yan ha. Whenever you talk about those codes, sulat natin dito. Whenever you talk about those codes, so let's just create another codes, no? Okay, let's isolate all the codes. You have letter A for the DNA, for example, DNA. Okay, you have letter A, you have letter E, you have letter C, you have letter C, you have letter G, you have letter T, you have letter A. So please give me the partners. Letter C for letter G, letter C for letter G, letter G for letter C, letter T for letter A for letter T. Is it easy? In the local boards, you will be asked to identify the correct pairing, ha? In the local boards. It's easy naman. Di ba? Oh, now question. What does this code stands for? So for example, this would now be telling you, this is now why you will be having Down syndrome. This would now be the genes for you to have now why you are tall. Siya yung magsasabi ng why you are tall, why you have Down syndrome, why you have now a problem. Okay? So, ibig sabihin, these codes actually would now be translated to your physical attributes. Clear? So, you have billions of these per cell. You have billions of your DNA per cell. Do you agree? Yes. Kaya nga, it's so majestic that God has created a perfect computer. 'Di ba? That it has created, He has created the parts that has its own function. Clear tayo doon? Yes. And a very small, okay, microscopic cell would now have another billions of DNA inside it. 'Di ba? Kaya every time that you're going to feel lonely, okay, feel sad that everything's not going your way, always think about this. God has created you in the very special way as you are. 'Di ba? Kasi nga every cell inside your body counts. God has given you so much DNA inside of your cell. Correct? And this is actually expected to function really well. 'Di ba? Unless there's actually a gene that was adapted from your previous generation. Yun lang. 'Di ba? Oh, now, isa-isay natin. Again, when does these cells would now be able to change its code every time that you will be faced with a risk factors? The risk factors can actually change the code. Nagkakaintindihan? So if you have faulty pairing, is it good? As much as possible, I don't want to be exposed with the faulty pairing, ha? Okay? So before I will be discussing what's going to happen, okay, when you are exposed to a faulty pairing, I just want to explain first those things that would now change the code. Clear? So dito muna tayo kay risk factors. Correct? So remember, anything that deviates against the normal anatomy and physiology. So what happens? It changes the code. Kaya nga, I would be giving you the code aggrieved. Ito po, aggrieved. Aggrieved. Oh, hindi ka mawawala. Kasi parang kinawawa. Tama? Aggrieved. When we talk about now your aggrieved, okay, this would now be my code, okay, for your risk factors. And every time that there would now be these risk factors, always remember that A would now stands for age. Remember that this is inevitable. This is a non-modifiable. Because our body is a wear and tear mechanism. What used to be very functional might not be functional anymore. What used to be complete might not be complete anymore. Why? Because of aging process. It's a wear and tear mechanism. So when you go beyond, okay, more than 50, that increases your risk for changes of code. Clear? Am I clear? Yes. Another for this would now be, okay, alcoholism. Alcoholism. Okay. So when you take alcohol, is it normally seen inside the body? Is alcohol normally seen inside the body? No. And every time that something that is deviating from normal anatomy and physiology, what happens to the cell? It can change the code. That's the main reason. If it's not normally seen inside the body, always remember, it can change the code. So when you are alcoholic or you consume a lot of alcohol, always remember that you are at risk for developing pancreatic cancers and liver cancers. That's the highest. But actually, it can create all types of cancers. Clear? But the highest rank is the liver and pancreatic cancer because that is where the alcohol is going to be processed. Clear? So ibig sabihin, ito yung highest if you are alcoholic. Correct? So there might be some changes of code in the pancreatic cells and your hepatic cells. Okay, just in case you are alcoholic. Clear? Next. Okay. When we talk about now the letter G, okay, when we talk about the letter G, of course, this would now be regarding your genetics. Okay, genetics. Okay. Remember in genetics, you have this so-called BRCA1 or BRCA2. I will be discussing this later on. BRCA1, breast cancer genes 1 and 2. Okay, that breast cancer genes are what you call as oncogene. Okay, I'll be discussing this later on. But before, first, I will be enumerating first everything. Okay? Kasi yung iba, easily understandable. Okay? Next, another would now be your gender issues. When we talk about the gender issues, is it the male or female that is more prone to cancers or changes of codes? Guys, guys, remember, the more estrogen you have, okay, the more estrogen you have, the more that you are exposed to a culprit. A consistent estrogen level inside the body would now predispose you to have, okay, to have cancer. Why? Because estrogen is being eaten up by your tumors, being eaten up by your cancer cells. Ito po yung food for cancers. Clear? For cancer cells. Kinakain niya yan. Guys, eto ha. So, which is which? Are we talking about the male or female who has consistent estrogen level?
Female.
Female.
Very good. It's the male. Huh? I thought that there's a consistency when it comes to estrogen when we talk about the female. Guys, the estrogen of female, okay, person is consistently fluctuating every month. So hindi siya consistent. Unlike us, guys, our estrogen is actually consistent. And the type of estrogen that we have is what you call as estradiol. Okay? Ito yung mas delikado. Clear tayo doon? Ito yung bad estrogen. Clear? Clear? Yes. And when you have this estradiol, always remember that this will be eaten by your cancer cells. How about the one that could now be seen in female clients? So what do you call their estrogen? That's what you call as your proto-estrogen, or also known as phytoestrogen. Pag sinabi mong phyto or proto-estrogen, phytoestrogen, so this is a good estrogen that is usually fluctuating every month. Clear? And this would now give female clients the secondary sexual characteristics. Tama? Kaya ginagamit nila. Guys, we cannot utilize our estrogen, the estradiol. And don't wish for that. Bakit? Gusto mo lumaki boobs mo? Di ba? Di ba? Tapos, would you want every month you have menstruation? Di ba? Kaya nga, it is not very much needed for us to utilize our estrogen. Kaya we have consistent. Or else every month, somebody will be asking you to go out for basketball. Tol, basketball tayo. Sorry pare, meron ako eh. Pwedeng ganon. Kaya nga, who among the following would have a problem when it comes now to cancer? Male talaga, pinakamarami. Correct? Unless repro-related. O sabi, di bagay. Sabi, tol, basketball tayo. Sorry, meron ako. Diba? So, male clients except for, okay, highest risk ang male when it comes now to cancer, except for what? Except for what? Okay, repro-related. So for example, cervical cancer, is it male or female? Female na, wala naman sa male nun eh. Uterine cancer. Ovarian cancer, sabi ni Sarah, male char. Ovarian cancer, breast cancer. Yung breast cancer, it's still a female ha, kasi you have bigger boobs than us. Correct? Now, how about now prostate cancer? O testicular cancer? Lung cancer? Basta ganito lang ha. All types of cancer would now be under male, except repro. Female repro. Sir, I have question. Please don't. Okay, wag daw i-mention ang name. Yes, eto nga po. Sasabihin ko sa inyo mamaya. Kasunod yan. Sige. There's a question in here. Sir, I have a question. Wag na daw sabihin yung pangalan niya. Does taking contraceptive pills make a person more prone to cancer? Yes. Yes po. Ito po yan nasa baba, yung estrogen level. Later on, I will be discussing why. Because it's actually the food for the food for cancer cells. Ang more prone lang po talaga is actually the estradiol. But even the phytoestrogen can still be eaten. Yun nga lang, by cancer cells, yun nga lang, your phytoestrogen fluctuates. Kaya, sometimes, the cancer cell will be fully nourished, but sometimes it's not. Kasi nga, nagpa-fluctuate. Tama? Yes. Sir, paano po pag may gynecomastia ang lalaki? Gynecomastia is secondary to your hormones called your mineralocorticoids and ketosterone. When we say ketosterone and your mineralocorticoids, those are the hormones being created by your adrenal cortex. But we will be discussing that when we go to endocrine system. That's the main reason you have gynecomastia. Clear? Yes. O yun. Kasi may tinanong dito, sir, paano po pag may gynecomastia ang lalaki? Di ba? Sabi niya, yes naman. When you have now bigger boobs na, just like you have gynecomastia, enlargement of breast tissues, of course, you'll be prone for cancer na. Bakit? Kasi nga, you have bigger boobs na. But remember, not all male would now undergo gynecomastia. Tama? Lahat ba kami merong gynecomastia? Hindi. Kaya sino pa rin na mas marami? Is it male or female na malalaki ang boobs? Female pa rin. Female pa rin. Tama? Kaya pagka breast cancer, kanino yan? Kay female yan. What if you have now your brain cancer? O male pa rin yan. Esophageal cancer, male pa rin yan. I did not say that female will not have such cancer. What we're talking about is the highest risk. Sino yung mas marami ang chance to develop cancers? Clear? Sir, question lang po. Okay? Can we really prevent cancer by regularly donating blood? Actually, ganito yan. When we talk about cancer, it's a multifactorial. Okay? That's the main reason why I'm discussing the risk factor to you. The more that you have the risk factors, the higher chance of winning cancer. It's a multifactorial. Okay? So for example, you are donating blood. Kasi when you donate naman the blood, it will just be replenished again by your body. So you will just undergo another erythropoiesis. Correct? Wala yun. Whether you donate or not, it's just the same thing because your blood will still die after 120 days. When you remove it prematurely, it doesn't matter because it's going to create another blood. Sir, yung mga vices din po ba factor kaya mas mataas yung risk po ng males? Yes, even the vices. Remember, male clients are known to be exposed more with stress. And remember, alam mo ba, with male clients, they are more prone to stress. Tama? Yes. Ibig sabihin, when you are more prone to stress because the society is expecting you to be the producer. Tama? Ikaw dapat ang head of the family. You will be the one to work this way. You will be doing this. You will be, no matter how we want equality to happen, it would always fall down with male clients to be exerting more effort than female. Ganun talaga yon. That's how the society. Kahit sabihin ni female, hindi, pantay na tayo ngayon. Kung ano kaya mo, kaya ko din. 'Di ba? Pero ang pinagbubuhat pa rin nila ng mga balde, yung male pa rin. 'Di ba? Correct ba? Yes, that's the main reason when male clients would now be undergoing stress, they would be more prone for addiction. So ibig sabihin, all the vices just like smoking, what else? Alcoholism. What else? Or pwede rin naman drugs or recreational activities. Kaya si male clients are very much prone to that. Clear? So the more you expose yourself towards vices, the more chances of winning. Para kang na raffle entry. 'Di ba? So you have parang ganun lang. Correct? Yes. Very good. Good question yun ha. Okay. Matayin nyo yung ayaw nyo sabihin yung pangalan nyo. Sabihin nyo na yung pangalan nyo. To naman. Magkakakilala ba kayo dito lahat? Do you know one another? Have you seen one another in person? At talaga, before the pandemic happened, magkaka-classmate kayo. O sige. Sabi nila. O sige na. Can we proceed now to the next one? Sige. So sabi natin, another would now be an issue about the race. Okay? Lagyan ko dito the race. Okay. Always remember there are certain races that will now be having the highest risk. So for example, yung race po natin, okay, if you are belonging to the African American group, African American also know the blacks, 'di ba? Yung blacks or African American. In the US, we do not call them as blacks anymore because that is discriminative. Actually, okay? So for them, okay. So as much as possible, we call them as African Americans. But in the actual exam, they usually would call them as black. Okay? So wag kayong malilito doon. Okay. The black races usually would now eat a lot of high salt, high fat diet. And if you have so much salt and fat in the diet, there would now be accumulation of more salt and more fat inside the body. And that would now deviate from normal anatomy and physiology. That's the main reason why, okay, that cells changes its code. Clear? Kasi nga, they are more prone of eating what? They're more prone of eating high salt, high fat diet. Correct? So, accordingly, and about the race, it is included also in their genes that they are more prone for what? Cervical and prostate cancer. For cervical and prostate cancer. Okay? Ito genetic na. By genetics na. Okay? So, ibig sabihin, aside from them eating a lot of high salt, high fat diet, so they are more prone for developing cervical and prostate cancer because of genes. Clear? Clear? Madali? Is it easy? And how about now? Of course, if we have blacks, we have whites. Tama? When we talk about the whites, di ba? We're actually talking about the whites. These are the Caucasians. And when we talk about Caucasians, marami sa kanila Jews. Mga Jews, Hudyo, Jews. Okay. Also known as Judaism. Okay? So, when we talk about Jews, Hudyo, Judaism, they practice yung mismong religion, okay, ng Jews sila. Okay? So, they are the followers of Old Testaments. Okay? So, I'll be discussing those soon just in case we will be seeing each other for NCLEX review. But it will not come out in the local boards. Okay? So, because there's a lot of there's a lot of rules and regulations when we talk about now the Jews or Judaism. But remember that Caucasians are more prone for, okay, sabi natin, your breast cancer and testicular cancer. Breast cancer and testicular cancer as per, okay, daw now be related towards what? Genetics. By genes. Clear? Oh, pagka by genes, wala tayong kalaban-laban dun. 'Di ba? Because it was actually transferred from generation to generation. So wala tayong laban doon if you are more prone to that. Correct? Yes. Okay. Next, how about Japanese? Okay, Japanese. With Japanese, always remember they are more prone for what? Okay, Zollinger Ellison syndrome. Zollinger Ellison. syndrome. When we talk about Zollinger-Ellison syndrome, this is actually a type of your gastrinoma. Gastrinoma. Or also known as your gastric cancer. Tama? Gastric cancer. Nakain po ng uncooked meat. Okay. Sabi nakain po. Okay. Guys, remember ha, why do you think Japanese would usually be prone for stomach cancer? May nagsagot dito kasi po kumakain sila ng uncooked meat. Yung mga sushi, raw food. Tama ba? Tama ba? Remember ha, raw food is rich in omega-3 and 9. Alam mo ba, omega-3 and 9 are known to be anti-cancer. Alam mo ba yon? Antioxidant yun ni omega-3 and 9. O, ibig sabihin, it's not because of the raw food. Walang problema kung raw. But the problem is that they are, they are eating large fishes. When you eat large fish, the larger the fish, the higher the mercury content. Remember ha, mga whales, shark, yan, octopuses, yung mga malalaki talaga, yan. So even yung mga other creatures in the sea, would also have mercury in it, just like sea urchin, yan. Yung mga uni, yan. So that's the problem because they are prone to experimenting, di ba? They experiment a lot with what they eat. So the problem, the higher content of mercury is being consumed. Correct? So again, it's because of the fish. The larger the fish, the higher the mercury. Clear? And mercury can change. Di ba, is it normal for your mercury to be found inside the body? Yung mercury, hindi. Yung element na mercury, yung metal, hindi. You should not have mercury. Kaya nga anything that deviates around the body can cause changes of code. Clear? Next tayo. Aside from that, sabi natin, let's talk about now another R. Of course, radiation. Radiation. Sige, palitan ko yung color. Radiation. So what type of radiation? Any types of radiation can actually change the code. You have now your alpha, beta, gamma, and UV rays, or X-ray radiations. Diba? So any types of radiation ha, any types of radiation can actually change the code. Clear? Clear po tayo doon? Yes, okay. Now, another thing is that you do also have your immunosurveillance interruption. I will be discussing this later kasi magkadikit sila ni ni BRCA1 and BRCA2, also known as Oncology. Basta ilagay ko lang po muna. This is now what you call as your immunosurveillance interruption. Okay. Sabi natin, anong color? Ito na lang. Immunosurveillance interruption. Immunosurveillance interruption. Okay, this is now what you call as your tumor suppressor gene. Okay, tumor suppressor gene. This is now what you call as your tumor suppressor gene. Okay, your tumor suppressor gene is also known as your P53 or P56 or P21. Okay. Those genes, nakikita po yan dito. So for example, ito daw po, si CNG, this is your P53 or P56 or P21. Example lang ha. Okay. Guys, we have so much of those P53, P56, P21. Marami tayo dyan sa genes. Okay? Now, ang problem natin, I just want to emphasize that your P53, P56, or P21, these are now what you call as your tumor suppressor gene. Correct? They are the ones communicating with the lysosome for the lysosome to burst. Ibig sabihin, the lysosome will not just burst right away. It should be communicated first by the DNA. Kailangan yung program, kailangan yung brain. Will be communicating first. Yung kumbaga, command center mo si DNA eh. Yung function siya eh, di ba? The command center should be telling that lysosome to burst. And what is the specific DNA strand that would now be telling that lysosome to burst? It's the P53, P56, or P21. And as you grow old, you lose that. Nawawala na rin si P53, P56, P21. That's the main reason if your immunosurveillance will be interrupted. Okay. Will be interrupted. What will happen to the lysosome? Can it still burst? Can it still die? No, it cannot die. So what will happen if the abnormal cells will not be able to die? It will just regenerate and multiply. Nakakaintindi yan? Ganun ha? So, do you think your P56, P21, and P53 are very much important component of your DNA? Yes, important yan. Ang problem, that could also have a faulty pairing. Kasi sabi mo, eto siya eh. The problem is that this could also be affected by the risk factors. Pwedeng siya magkaroon din ng faulty pairing. So pwede siya maging letter T. Hindi na sila partner. May interrupt. Hindi na magfa-function. Clear? Parang it's just like a computer kasi. When you have computer, you have software. But in your software, if there would not be viruses that would not be affecting the program, what happens to the application that you have in your cell phone and your computer? Does it work fine? No. You will not be getting the same output as you are expecting. Clear? O parang ganun lang yan. So, important ba si P53, P56? Yes. Okay, next. Estrogen, letter E. Okay, estrogen. Okay, don't get me wrong. Estrogen and androgen. So, kasama na rin po si androgen dyan. Okay, androgen, they are actually being eaten up by your cancer cells. Even the androgen, it's just that your estrogen is the highest amount that will be eaten by your cancer cells. Kaya nga the more estrogen you have, the more that you are going to have a problem when it comes now to cancer. Clear? Clear? Yes. In high amount, consistent. Okay? Now, another thing, how about now those people undergoing hormonal replacement therapy? What do you call this? Hormonal replacement. O basta, hormonal replacement. Ulitin ko lang ha. Hormonal replacement therapy. Pwede ba yan? What do you mean by hormonal replacement therapy? For those people undergoing now pills, contraceptions, ito yung tinatanong sa akin kanina. Of course, you are supplying hormones eh. If you are supplying your estrogen, what happens now? It can easily be eaten by your cancer cells. Any abnormal cells would be eating that estrogen and androgen. So kaya nga, for those people, for example, people belonging in third sex, they are usually would be injecting estrogen, or sometimes yung mga female clients naman androgen shots. They are prone, okay, for changes of codes. Clear? So yung PCOS po na nagpipills with estrogen, higher ang risk. Anybody who would be taking something to do with estrogen, may higher ang risk. Higher talaga. But remember, sabi natin ha, okay, sometimes it's within the luck eh. Kasi sometimes naman, even though you have PCOS, polycystic ovarian cancer, ovarian cyst rather. So you have PCOS and you'll be given now estrogen. Di ba, the benefits should always outweigh the risk. Kaya nga ine-explain yun sa inyo. may chance. Magkaka-risk ka. Syempre, higher ang risk mo compared to those people who are not injecting or who are not taking pills. Gets mo? Magkaka-risk ka. Ganun siya. So as much as possible, if just in case that you will be taking that, be sure that the benefits would always outweigh the risk. Tama? Ganun palagi yun. Oh. So, unless, syempre, ang problem natin, of course, if you would want to have a normal menstruation, normal mechanism of the body. So, we're just hoping that cancers will not be developed. 'Di ba? Yun lang naman ang sinasabi natin doon. That's why you need to monitor yourself every time that you are taking these types of medications. Clear? Kaya nga, what is the best way? All the natural ways, 'di ba? As much as possible, if you'll not be taking medication, if you are not required to take medication, don't take medications. 'Di ba? Because there's always a side effect and adverse effect of all drugs, hormones that you are going to take. Tama? So go for the natural way. Ganun daw yun eh. 'Di ba? Natural way. Yun nga lang, meron ka namang history ng cancer sa family. Eh di ganun din. Sabi ko nga, it's a multifactorial. As much as possible, you have to take care of yourself, most especially that you already have the cancer genes, the BRCA1, BRCA2. Clear? Yes. O, ganun. You take care of yourself na lang. O, next. O, next tayo. So, let's talk about the letter V. What do you mean by the letter V? The letter V would now be, by the way, I just want to insert another thing about the estrogen. Remember, for those people, okay, when it comes now to the estrogen level, okay, ganito yan ha, the more estrogen that you have, the more problem that you'll be having, okay? And sometimes, overusage of the body or underusage of the body can actually predispose you to develop cancer. What do I mean by that? So for example, you are sexually active. When you are sexually active, okay, ito yung code ko dito eh. Okay. So, for example, you are sexually active. We'll be utilizing this code so that it's easier for you to memorize ha. Okay. So for example, you are wait, ba't nagaganon? Okay. For example, wait, one moment. There's something wrong with my screen. Okay. Nagko-close siya. One moment lang po. Okay, okay. So for example, you are sexually active. Okay. So for example, you have a happy sexual life. Happy sexual life. And sad sexual life. Ganun na lang kamo. Okay? So just in case that you have a happy sexual life, always remember, whenever that you're going to make use of your reproductive system more and more. So for example, dinan mo to ha, if you are making use of your reproductive system less than 20 years old, yes, you have a happy sexual life. But you are prematurely utilizing your reproductive system, okay, at the age that is not yet required. Ibig sabihin, less than 20, there are some reproductive system that are not yet fully developed. That's the main reason when you are going to utilize that, okay, early coitarch, okay, can lead to cervical, uterus, and ovarian cancer. Bakit? Kasi you deviated, okay, you deviated to the normal usage of your reproductive system. Clear tayo doon? So, sabi natin, happy ang sexual life. For example, this is what you call a sexual life ha. Oh, di ba? When you have a happy sexual life, you'll be, example, you're utilizing your vagina less than 20, mga 17 years old, yan, ginagamit na, or 14 years old in some cultures, diba, in the US. So, minsan may mga nagko-commit with premarital sex, yung mga ganon. So, ang problem doon, you are making use of the reproductive system prematurely. So, that's already deviating from what is normal. So, saan ngayon prone to? For cervical, uterus, and ovarian cancer. Clear tayo doon? So for example naman, you are more than 30 pero you are grand multipara. So for example, you are already multipara. Ang dami mo ng anak. More than 2 na eh. So, when you already are making use of your vajayjay or your reproductive system more and more and more, what happens now? It's going to undergo abnormality. Tama? Happy ka nga, ang problem mo naman, you will be developing cervical, uterus, and ovarian cancer. Mataas ang risk for cervical, uterus, and ovarian cancers. Clear? Yung isa premature, yung isa overuse. 'Di ba? So for example, you are talking about community sex workers. 'Di ba? Community sex workers, ito yung mga prostitutes. They are more prone for this cervical, uterus, ovaries. Why? Ovarian cancer. Why? Because they are making use of their reproductive system more and more. So yun ang nagiging problem. Clear? Next. So yung PCOS po, yan. Sige. Next tayo. How about sad sexual life? Wow. Sexual life. In my YouTube channel, this is a little bit 'di ba? Iba yung term na ginamit doon. So that syempre ibang participant here in the Lasal, we have to be prim and proper with the terms. In my YouTube channel, it's a different thing, no? Saka na pagka-graduate nyo na. Eto naman, for the sad sexual life, okay, the problem lies now in that, of course, sabi natin, at the 20, okay, when you are already 20 years old to 30 years old, you are expected to be pregnant na. Sir, sa TikTok po may edu-talk bagay po. Anong edu-talk? Edu-talk? May ganon? Sige. Sa 20 to 30 years old, it is expected that you become pregnant. The process of pregnancy, breastfeeding, okay, should be undergone by a female client or by a female person. Dapat daw nabubuntis ka na ng 20 to 30 years old. Plus, somebody has to be breastfed by you. Ibig sabihin, may normal milk flow na dapat yung breast mo at that age sa 20 to 30 years old. Hindi ko po sinabing magmadali kayo mag-asawa. It's just that what I'm talking about is that normal physiological event in the body. It is expected that you get pregnant ng 20 to 30. That's the healthiest age to get pregnant. Clear? Yes, sir po. Pwede po kayo ipasok doon, sir. Sir, paano po yung nag-30 pero di po magbubuntis? Yun nga ang problem mo. Naging sad ang sexual life. So for example, in 20 to 30, ikaw ay nulipara pa rin. Example, you have not been pregnant yet, nulipara. Automatically, you are prone for breast cancer. Paano daw po kung active po, sexual, pero di po buntis? Kailangan daw po kasi sa 20 to 30 years old, dapat daw po talaga, or sexually active, okay yun. Basta 20 to 30 years old. Okay yun kasi expected naman talaga. Because your body is already developed to carry whatever is going to be inside it. Correct? So expected, okay lang. Tama? Yes. Sabi, cryopreserved eggs for sale. Ito mga to. Okay, ganito. Now, so pagka ikaw ay nulipara, automatically a problem when it comes now to breast cancer is more prone. Breast cancer. Okay, cancer. Tama? Yes, again. If you have happy sexual life, so for example, less than 20 or more than 30, you have multipara, and then less than 20, you already have the early coitarch. Coitarch. First sexual experience is less than 20. That would now predispose you to have now cervical, uterus, and ovaries. So, the normal sexual age, sexual reproduction or reproductive age is 20 to 30. Yan talaga yung pinaka-normal. 'Di ba? 'Di ba under the book that's 15 to 35 ang normal reproductive age. Pero sa atin, about the cancer, that's 20 to 30. Pwede. Paano po kung single? Prayers po pag single, no? Okay. Next. Prayer po para magkaroon ng partner, 'di ba? Ganon 'yon. Pag-pray natin that someone will come along, 'di ba? 'Di ba? Yung kasama ng karawahe, kasama ng kabayo, 'di ba? Will be delivered to your door, 'di ba? Daw po pala kumilos na. Hindi naman. No, I'm not promoting that you engage with your sexual kumbaga experience or activity ha. What I'm telling you is that you finish first your studies. Okay? You finish first your studies because being pregnant, okay? Being pregnant kasi entails a lot of responsibility. So you have to be physically matured, mentally matured, financially matured. 'Di ba? Ninong daw ako. Ito talaga 'tong mga to. Okay, next tayo. Sige, ninong ako. Okay. Pag naging USRN na, siguro about 27 to 28, sige, pwede pa kayong humabol nun eh. Tama? Yes. So, after you have graduated, siguro about 21, 22, mag-work muna kayo, stable muna before you get pregnant. Kasi it's really hard to work, it's really hard to study NCLEX or other international exam or even to work when you already have kids, 'di ba? So yun ang magiging ano doon. So I'm not promoting any early coitarch in here. Okay? Just to avoid cancer. Sabi no. O sige. Next tayo. So sabi na breast cancer. And aside from that, eto pa ha. Okay. Whenever you have now, okay, whenever you have now your menstruation, guys. Okay. For female person in here. Okay. Whenever you have menstruation, are you happy that you have menstruation every month? Are you happy, guys? O sabi nila, no, I'm not happy. Guys, ganito ha. So, ibig sabihin, if God will allow you not to have your menstruation every month, will you be happy? Sabi nila, yes. Yes. Kaya nga, the more exposed that you are with estrogen, the higher the chance of cancers. Kaya nga, just in case that you have now your early menarche, tandaan ha, di ba sa side ko na lang ilalagay yon. Early menarche, okay, and late menopause can predispose you to have breast cancer as well. Clear? Remember, early menarche and late menopause can predispose you. Kasi nga, you are more prone to exposure to estrogen at an earlier age. 'Di ba? And anything in the body that deviates from with the normal anatomy and physiology, so what happens? Changes of code. And what part of the body changes its code? Just in case that you have your early menarche. When you say early menarche, first menstruation mo. First menstruation should be at least around 12 years old. Okay? Pero if you are going to have it less than 12, so for example, 8 years old, nag-early menarche ka na, higher ang risk mo for breast cancer. Clear? Because your body did not undergo the normal physiological event. Kasi dapat 12 pa, 8 ka eh. Na pa-early. Tama? Next tayo. How about late menopause? Same thing goes with that. So, ibig sabihin, late menopause, you terminated your menopause more than 50. Dapat mga 45 eh. 45 to 50. Kaso more than 50 before you you had your cessation of your menopause. Your menstruation rather. So, the more exposed you are with your estrogen. So again, ano ulit yon? Breast cancer. So just remember this, if you are happy with your sexual life, automatically, most likely, you are more prone for cervical, uterus, and ovarian cancer. If you have a sad sexual life, most likely, 20 to 30 years old, you're still nullipara, or you have not been pregnant yet. Okay? So, anong nangyayari? Breast cancer. And how about menstruation issues? When you have now your early menarche, so what happens now? You will be having a problem when it comes now to what? Okay, again, breast cancer and late menopause, menopause more than 50, doon nag-initiate again breast cancer. Clear? Yes, good PM, sir. Ang paggamit po ba ng sex toy below 20 years old ay prone po sa risk or exclusive lang po yung prone sa coitus between man and woman? Okay, yung mga sex toys kasi, remember ganito eh, when we talk about now our sex toys, 'di ba? Kasi may nagtanong dito sa group. So, pagka gumagamit ka ng sex toys, it depends now on how you're going to use it. 'Di ba? If you'll be inserting something, okay, if you will be inserting something inside there, kung ano man ang ini-insert nyo, if that something could actually harm yung mismong environment of physiology of your anatomy, so there would now be a big tendency that you're already deviating with what is normal. Correct? So ang tendency, pwede ka pa rin mag-develop ng mga changes of codes. Mga ganon. So, what I'm talking about in here is that whenever you are going to have something that is extra in your life that should not be taken, that should not be utilized, okay, prematurely, that's the time that you will be exposed to a higher risk. Tama? Ganun siya. But when we talk about now 20 to 30 years old, paano sabi, sir, I do not have my boyfriend or girlfriend, but I'm using my sex toys. Oh, if you're using your sex toys, still you're not undergoing the normal process of pregnancy, the normal process of fluctuation of estrogen because you're pregnant. You're not utilizing your prolactin to create your breast milk. So still you're deviating kasi ang importante dito you get pregnant and that you will be breastfeeding. Yun yung importante because it is expected that 20 to 30 years old may normal mechanism that the body would undergo. Ganun siya. Okay? Same po ba yan if hindi straight? Anong hindi straight? Saglit. Ang daming tanong dito. Ay, kaya po pala yung matandang dalaga usually nagkaka-breast cancer. Yes, tama. Yung mga matatandang dalaga usually nagkaka-breast cancer. Tama. Same po ba yan if hindi straight? What do you mean? Paano po yung hindi po yun yung goal? Kung hindi yun yung goal, okay lang naman. It's just that under the exam, this is the answer. Diba? Kasi in the actual exam, like LGBT. So LGBT again. Ganun nga yan. So whether you're under the LGBT, okay, third sex, if you'll not become pregnant ng 20 to 30, higher ang risk mo. 'Di ba? But if you'll be more than 30 naman, more than 30 tapos you get pregnant naman, okay, you get pregnant pero sobrang dami mo namang anak, ang problem, higher risk na naman yun. 'Di ba? Kasi the cancer theory would state that overuse, underuse, misuse, and abuse can actually lead towards cancer. Tama, cancer theories yun eh. Misuse, abuse, underuse. 'Di ba? So, ibig sabihin, kung hindi mo ginagamit ng tama yung parts ng katawan, automatic it could now lead towards cancer. Kung ginagamit mo ng sobra-sobra, okay, ang katawan mo, automatic it could lead to cancer. Kung hindi mo naman ginagamit yung katawan mo, automatic it would lead to cancer. 'Di ba? Correct. Underuse, overuse, misuse, abuse. Or if you are abusing anything in excess, it could also lead to cancer. O parang ganun lang. Sabi daw, you only live once. Hay nako. Maalis na nga tayo dito. Baka matanggalan ako ng trabaho dito. Next. Okay. Sige, those are the kinds of things no that you need to take note of when it comes now to the risk factors. Okay, sige, tapusin lang natin yung mga risk factors natin before we move on with the physiological events. Okay, so next will now be the letter V. Okay, so when we talk about the letter V, what do you mean by the letter V? Okay, so sabi natin with your letter V comes now the virus and other pathogens, other pathogenic materials. Pathogenic materials. Number one, cause of all cancers, of most of the cancers are viral. Okay? Are viral. Because virus tends to change and replicate the RNA and DNA. Ini-involve nila yung sarili nila when it comes now to RNA and DNAs. Tama? Yes. So, that's the main reason that there would now be some changes of codes that might happen. If that would now be the case, okay, there could be some cancers that might be developed. Example, you had your HPV virus, or for example, you have now your Epstein-Barr, okay, Epstein-Barr virus, okay, or po pwede namang you had your Hepa V virus, Hepa B viruses, correct? Oh, so those are the some of examples ng problems when it comes now to our virus and other pathogenic materials. Okay? So how about now your how about now your H. pylori, guys? H. pylori. H. pylori can still have a problem when it comes now to cancer. Helicobacter pylori. Okay? So remember, it could also cause gastrinoma, or sometimes it could cause now a type of a problem when it comes now to Hodgkin's disease or non-Hodgkin's disease. Okay? So we'll be talking about those types of cancer later on. Okay, next tayo. So again, what is the number one culprit when it comes to pathogenic agent? It's a virus. Number one culprit. But I did not mention that yung fungi, bacteria, and other some sort of protozoa cannot also, okay, lead towards cancer. Pwede din. Pwede din. Okay? Sige. Next po tayo. Of course, we have now your environment. Environment. Okay? Environment. Environment. When we talk about the environment, I already have mentioned your pathogenic. So, when we talk about the non-pathogenic naman, non-pathogenic, okay, the number one cause of all types of cancer is smoking. Nasabi ko na yan, smoking. Tama? With smoking comes now all types of cancer. Pwede ma-activate ang all types of cancer, even the skin. Correct? So, remember that, okay, every time that you are going to smoke, always remember that there's a lot of organs that might be affected and can change its code. Clear? If you are not thinking about yourself, think about your family members who's going to be affected when you develop cancer. Kasi ang hirap mag-alaga ng may cancer. Tama? Emotionally distressing, ano pa? Psychologically distressing, physically distressing, ang hirap. Why? Because yung emotions na po pwede nilang maramdaman every time that they will be seeing their family members having cancer. 'Di ba? It's really a burden in their thoughts and mind. So kaya nga every time that you're going to, and financially disturbing as well. Tama? Distressing as well. Kaya nga every time that you do smoke, think about your family members. Just don't think about yourself. Tingnan mo sila kasi ang taas ng risk talaga. Next tayo, environment that has formaldehyde, 'di ba? Formaldehyde. Ano yung formaldehyde? Your formalin. So for example, you work in a factory that has formalin in it, or you in a laboratory, you're exposing more yourself with formaldehyde. So that could also lead towards changes of code. Correct? So for example, you are utilizing now some product that has formaldehyde. Okay, yung mga formaldehyde na yan, yung may mga formalin. Example, shampoo. Okay? Always read the labels. Kasi there is some shampoo that contains formalin. Okay? Hindi na ako magme-mention kasi I'm recorded. Baka lumabas mademanda ako. Okay? Just always read the label. If it contains formalin or formaldehyde, don't use the product. Clear? Clear. O sige, next tayo. Another, if you are actually in the environment that are making use of malathion. What is malathion? Malathion are your pesticides. Okay? That's the main reason that every time that you eat your fruits and vegetables, it should be an organic one. Kasi pagka organic, they are not making use of pesticides called malathion. Clear? So malathion can actually change the code. Next, another would now be exposure to environmental hazards. Okay, yung mga elements, environmental hazards. Hazards, just like asbestos, di ba? Or any fumes, okay, that could lead to lung cancer. Tama? Yes, yes. And how about now in the diet? Guys, for the last portion, how about now in the diet? O, di ba meron tayong diet? O, always remember, in the diet naman po, we're actually talking about yung mga high salt, high fat diet, high salt, high fat diet, and high cholesterol diet. Because anything in excess inside the body can lead to changes of code. Kaya nga, yung high salt, high fat, high cholesterol diet, okay, can lead you to develop cancer of the stomach, cancer of the breast, cancer of the liver, di ba? Cancer of the pancreas, okay? So, high salt, high fat, high cholesterol diet, yes, okay? And then, we have now our high in red meat, okay, for the diet. In red meat, always remember, in beef, okay, they have this so-called new 5GC, new 5GC. When you say new 5GC, that's your new neuro 5 glucose compound. It could actually activate the changes of code. So as much as possible, what we recommend is for us to eat white meat instead. Diba? Instead of red meat, because red meat contains new 5GC. So, ang problem mo, you are consuming a lot of red meat. Yung mga red meat, and decrease ngayon ang white meat mo. Dapat white meat. Clear? Clear po tayo doon? Oh, for those people who are actually eating fries. 'Di ba? Fries. Oh. How do you think these fries can now lead towards development of cancer? Is it because of the fries? Ay, saglit, may tanong dito. Okay. Does it also apply with vape po for the smoking? Again, when we talk about now something that you are consuming that should not be consumed, automatically it might cause, okay, changes of code. I'm not saying that vaping, yung mga yung mga e-cigarettes natin, I did not say that vaping can actually cause, because there hasn't been so much literatures that can cause that are saying that vaping can cause a problem. But knowing the fact that this is something that is foreign towards the body and it could now deviate from the normal anatomy and physiology, it might change. It might change. Limited pa kasi yung literature natin with regards to that. Question, Sir, di ba po nicotine din yung vape? There are some vape kasi that will not utilize nicotine. Oh, di ba? So, still something that is abnormal inside the body. Di ba? And how about the nicotine itself? Kaya nga tobacco can cause because of the nicotine, the tar, because it's not expected to be there in your body. Your new 5GC, this is actually a sugar compound that is seen in red meat. Okay? Ano po ulit, sir, yung neuro 5GC? Glucose compound. Neuro 5 glucose compound. That is actually the compound that could now be seen in red meat. That could activate now the changes of code. Okay? So yan ang nakikita sa red meat. O, meron pa po bang tanong? Yes. Yun daw po kasi gamit sa pagluto ng fries. Yes, very good. Oh, actually it's actually the oil in the fries. Kasi when you are going to make use of oil, be sure that the oil will not be burnt, okay, under a high heat. Mapapansin mo, there are some oil that when you place under a high heat, it would now create a carbon on top na may nasusunog. Yung nasusunog na yon, that's what you call as your carbon or sugar carbon that is being burnt. Ang tawag po doon, benzene. Ibig sabihin, yung oil na pinangluto dito, may benzene. Benzene are actually your sugar carbon that is burnt coming from the oil. Ito yung nasusunog under high heat. Example, try putting olive oil on a high heat. It will now be converting that sugar carbon na nasusunog. It's going on top. Kaya nga, ang olive oil, it's best when it's going to be taken raw. Raw. Okay? Huwag mo siya ilagay sa high heat. Nasusunog yung kanyang sugar. Nasusunog yung kanyang sugar carbon. So it becomes benzene. So when it becomes benzene, that's cancerous. That's carcinogenic. So what else? Safflower seed oil, your other types of oil, any types of oil that is burnt under high heat can produce benzene. Clear? So, sir, which oil is the best for us to cook our food? Ano daw po ang best for cooking? O, eto lang po, palm oil. Palm oil lang. Kasi yung palm oil, best po natin ang palm oil. Bakit po? Because yan po ang hindi nasusunog under a very high heat. Kung mapapansin mo, yung mga minola, yung mga golden fiesta, di ba? If you're going to notice, even though you're going to place that over a high heat, hindi siya nagke-create ng dark, okay, on top. Carbon. Di ba? Sir, mas cancerous po ba ang pag peanut oil? Peanut oil, nasusunog din po siya on top. So, sino lang ang best among the rest? The palm oil lang talaga. Clear? Yes, pamprito. Sir, pag air fried okay yun eh. Okay, air fried okay yun. Unless otherwise specified. Kasi baka mamaya air fryer ang ginamit mo for frying your fries. 'Di ba? So, syempre otherwise specified. Ang pinag-uusapan natin dito yung oil. Yun po bang sa itlog pag prinito? Yung pinanluluto po, yes, pwede po ba talaga yung mag-cause ng cancer, pati po yung sunog na barbecue? Yes. Because lahat po ng sunog na barbecue, okay, it contains carbon. Isama na natin dyan. Rich in carbon yung diet. Carbon. Ibig sabihin, for those people who are fan of eating charbroiled, ano ba yung charbroiled? These are your inihaw. Tama? Inihaw. Ganon. Kasi may carbon yan eh. Tama ba? Yes. O, eto pa. How about those Coke? Yung Coke po ba? Pwede? Coke. Siyempre, kung may fries ka, dagdagan na natin ng Coke plus Coke. Can this lead to cancer? Is it also a high risk? Just in case you're taking Coke. Yes or no? Oh, guys, you have to stop taking Coke. Bakit? Kasi nga, remember, you are more prone for diabetes. Hindi cancer, diabetes. That's the main reason. What we recommend is what? Coke Zero. Yung Diet Coke or Coke Zero. Para prone ka sa cancer. 'Di ba? Kasi yung Coke Zero mo, okay, yung Coke Zero mo, it contains aspartame. Aspartame. Ibig sabihin, any carbonated drink that contains now aspartame, yung aspartame mo kasi, yung sugar substitute yan. Fake sugar ibig sabihin. So it can cause now changes of code. So as much as possible, you stop from using that. Correct? O, eto pa. How about now preserved meats? Diet pa rin po tayo ha. How about now preserved meats? O syempre, with your preserved meats comes now nitrates and nitrite. Nitrates and nitrite. When you say nitrates and nitrite, these are the preservatives. 'Di ba? These are the preservatives. Guys, yung root beer po, it's okay for as long as it does not have, it doesn't have your aspartame. Aspartame kasi yung nakakakos ng cancer. With root beer comes diabetes kasi sugar yun. Diba? O ganun yan. Yung bata sa sugar content, diabetes yun, hindi po yung cancer. Tama? Yes. O sige. Pero mataas sa sugar substitute, yun yung magiging problem natin. Ano po ang mas mataas sa risk? Ideal inumin ang 0 or yung normal po? Guys, as much as possible, sabi natin, mataas ang risk. Saan po ba? Diabetes or cancer? Ano po mas ideal inumin? 0 o yung normal po? Depende po sa gusto mo mangyari. Gusto mo po ba cancer or gusto mo diabetes? Saan po mamamatay ka agad? Depende din po. It depends on where your cancer and diabetes will reach you. Diba? Sige. Okay, next. Next, and of course, yung mga last na lang po, yung mga smoked, 'di ba? Meron tayong tinatawag na smoked beef, smoked. Yung mga smoked, mga tinapa, okay? It would usually use now mataas na sodium and monosodium glutamate. Your sodium and monosodium glutamate, also known as MSG. 'Di ba? So if you have concentrated sodium just like your MSG, accordingly, there's evidence na it could cause cancer as well. It could change the code. Correct? Yes. Correct? Did you get this, guys? Yes. Madali lang ano. So ang problem mo, your fruits and vegetables are non-organic. Meaning, you are having now your fruits and vegetables. You're taking fruits and vegetables with malatayon. Kaya nga, as much as possible, 'di ba? When you go to the grocery, look for organic. Ang problem lang, when you see the word organic, it's a little bit expensive. Because it's really hard to grow plants without pesticides in it. Mahirap. Kaya nga, when they grow these plants, okay, without the pesticides, they charge a lot. Diba? Ganon. Talagang mataas ang payment for that. Because you're paying for the quality. Correct? Correct. Choose your killer na lang daw. O, diba? Sabi nila, choose your killer. Okay. So, as what I mentioned a while ago, this is a multifactorial. So, count the risk factors that you have. The more entries that you have, the more chances of winning, of changing the codes. Correct? Correct. So, ready na po ba tayo for the next one? Okay. So, what I'm going to discuss now is actually your physiological changes. Kasi I already have enumerated to you all those okay. Sir, palm oil is better than canola. Yes, palm oil is always better. Okay, palm oil is always better than any oil, any other oil. Okay? Why? Because it will not result to benzene. Hindi nangingitim. Okay? Hindi nangingitim yung oil under a very high heat. Okay? Sige. Guys, eto na. So we'll be going towards now our physiological changes. Correct? Yes. Or your physiology. Now, what's going to happen is that just in case that you already have your aggrieved, di ba? You were exposed with your aggrieved. So sabi natin, is it normal, abnormal inside the body? It becomes abnormal. And once the cell has become affected, or one cell will become affected by your aggrieved, so whether alcoholism, genetics, gender, so what happens now? There might be some changes of code. Di ba nasabi na natin yon? So all the risk factors can change code. Okay, can change code of the cell. But one good thing about our body is that not all codes will change its code. Nagkakaintindihan? Hindi po lahat ng code mag-change. Okay? There are certain portion of the DNA strand that will just change the code, but not all. Or not all, and also not all cells will change its code. Ayun naman ang kagandahan doon. Because kung ano lang yung natamaan, to those cells that will only be affected will only have its change in code. Clear? Now, for example, this particular cell will now be having, eto yan, yung particular cell natin dito will be having a change in code. Example na lang po. So yung letter C naging letter T. Okay? Let me just change this code. Instead of this becomes now the P53, P56, let's just make this code as something to do with why you are tall. Yun na lang po muna ito. Okay? So, sabi natin why you are tall. This code would now be answering the reason why. Ibig sabihin. Now, ang question, if this code will now be exposed towards now your risk factors, what will happen? It could now change its code. As you can see, the letter C becomes now partner with letter T. And that's what you call as the faulty pairing. Tama ba? Yes. What happens now just in case now that you have now a faulty pairing? Faulty pairing. Okay? Pairing. Will this be considered by the body as abnormal or normal? Guys, abnormal or normal?
Abnormal.
Abnormal. Magiging abnormal na siya. Will be considered by the body as abnormal. Okay? So sabi natin, just in case that this becomes now abnormal, what happens now is that it's going to call towards another thing inside the body. So, the body, di ba yung cell mo, okay, the body will now be communicating to the brain, okay, and the body will be communicating, and the brain will be communicating to that cell. Correct? So, what happens now is that the brain would now be activating this, what we call as the oncogene. Okay? So when we talk about the oncogene, always remember, so for example, this oncogene, your BRCA1, and BRCA2, okay, are also known as your oncogene. Always remember, almost all of us would have this. It's just that it's not activated. Clear? Yun nga lang, for example, this is now your oncogene. Ito daw kunwari si oncogene mo ha, oncogene. Okay. So for example, this is your oncogene. And what happened was, naging letter C siya. Or, sabihin na natin, hindi muna natin change yung code. Okay? When you have an effective oncogene, ulitin ko lang, when you have an effective oncogene, what happens now? The brain will be stimulating that oncogene in response to the presence of faulty pairing. Again, ulitin ko ha. When you have the risk factors, there's a change in code. When there's a change in code, that's what you call as a faulty pairing. If there's already a faulty pairing, that's something abnormal inside the body and should be communicated to the brain. Nung sinabi, brain, I have a faulty pairing in here, what do you want me to do? Oh no, oncogene, activate. So inactivate niya yung oncogene. That could now be found in the same DNA strand. So what do you mean by oncogene? Actually, the oncogene will be the one to make the cell go abnormal. Cells will go abnormal. Abnormal. Sir, why do we need the cells to become abnormal? So for example, ang gagawin niya po ng oncogene, instead of you having one nucleus, gagawin niya 2 nucleuses, or endoplasmic reticulum, dadamihan niya, maging 5, mitochondria, 3, 4, your Golgi apparatus, okay? Ang ginawa ni oncogene is that this would now convert, okay, the oncogene will now convert the cell to become abnormal. Physically abnormal. It's not only the code ha. Ang ginawa niyang physically abnormal. Minultiply niya those elements and those structures inside the cell. So that whenever that you will now be having the presence of or physical presence of that abnormality, this will now be communicated to the brain again. Brain, I really have my abnormality in here. I'm seeing there's a lot of nucleuses, endoplasmic reticulum. Okay, yun ang sinabi niya. So what happens now, when this goes back now to the brain, automatically what happens now is that the brain would now be activating another thing inside that DNA strand. The brain would now start activating. Okay, the brain would now start activating the TSG. Activation. Okay? When the TSG will be activated, that's your P53 to P56, automatically, what happens now is that there would now be the bursting of lysosome. Bursts. Tama ba yun? Yes. And when your lysosome will burst, what happens now is that, okay, sabi natin, the cell will die. And when the cell will die, of course, that's what you call as apoptosis. Clear? That is what you call as apoptosis. Or the contact inhibition. Contact inhibition. When you say contact inhibition, of course, if the cell will die, the cell will not be able to contact anymore any parts of the cell. Correct? Namatay na kasi. Kaya may contact inhibition. Clear tayo doon? Ulit. Is your TSG also a part of your DNA strands? Yes or no? Yes. Ibig sabihin, so for example, palitan natin to, gawin natin tong TSG. Okay? Para mas klaro tayo. So for example, this is now your TSG. Okay. The TSG is also located in our DNA strands. That when this TSG will be activated, what will happen? It would now give command towards the lysosome so that the lysosome will burst. Pag nagkaroon ka ngayon ng lysosomal bursting, then the cell will die. And that is what you call as the programmed cell death, also known as apoptosis, also known as contact inhibition. Why did you say it's a contact inhibition? Because the cell will not be able to communicate anymore with any parts of the cell, with any cell types nearby. Namatay na kasi siya. Kaya na-inhibit na yung contact. Clear tayo doon? Guys, any question? Guys? Guys, always remember, ulitin ko lang ha, yung flow natin. When you have the risk factors, you are exposed to the risk factors. What happened now to your cell, to your codes? It would now change the code. Pag nag-change ang code, this is now what you call as a faulty pairing. The faulty pairing initiates now the activation of oncogene. Tama ba yon? Remember, the faulty pairing initiates now the activation of your BRCA1 or BRCA2. And what is the role of your activation of BRCA1 or BRCA2? Okay, always remember the BRCA1 and BRCA2 will make the cell go more abnormal. Ibig sabihin, kanina codes lang ang naging abnormal. Ngayon, physically abnormal na siya. Why do you think it is important for us to have physically abnormal cell? Para mas makikita ngayon ng brain. Clear? When the brain would now be communicated with the presence of the abnormality inside the cell, what happens now? The brain will now be commanding the TSG to be activated. And what is the role of your TSG? The lysosome will burst. When the lysosome will burst, the cell will die. So question, if this cell will die just simply because the TSG already functioned, do you think the cell will still grow and divide? Mag-grow and divide pa ba sila? Hindi na. Kaya, do you have cancer or not?
Wala na po.
Wala tayong cancer pag ganyan ang nangyari. Clear tayo doon? Clear po ba? Yes. Yun nga lang, ang problem natin ganito is our TSG and oncogene also codes? Yes or no?
Yes po.
Yes. Ibig sabihin, will your TSG and oncogene also prone for changes of code? Yes or no?
Yes po.
Yes. Ngayon, ang problem natin, what if the oncogene changes its code? Example, yung oncogene mo dito naging letter T. Nagpartner ang T and T. Okay. So if the T will now be partnering to T and that is the oncogene that is being affected, what will happen now to the body, to the cell? Will you be having cancer or not?
Kakaroon po.
Ganito ha, tingnan mo ha. When this would happen, this would still be considered abnormal or normal?
Abnormal.
Abnormal. And still, what will happen now if this becomes now abnormal? The oncogene will not be able to make the cell go abnormal. Ulit. Pag ang oncogene nagkaroon ng problem, hindi niya na magagawa na gawing abnormal ang cell natin. And what is the main function of your oncogene? Gawing abnormal ang cell. That's the main function of your oncogene. Clear tayo doon? So question, if the oncogene, wala pala akong video. Okay, one moment. If the oncogene will now lose its function, to make the cell go abnormal, is that also an abnormality? Yes or no?
Yes po.
Yes po.
Oo, kasi hindi mo na nagampanan yung role mo. Kaya that would still serve as an abnormality inside the cell. Kaya nga, if there would now be some abnormality, that same faulty pairing will directly be communicated to the brain. Kaya nga the brain will still activate the TSG. And when the brain will activate the TSG, what happens now? The lysosome will still burst and the cell will die. Question. If there would now be changes in oncogene, will you be developing cancer? Yes or no? Yes or no? Sabi niya, no. Tingnan mo ha, for as long as buhay si TSG, for as long as you have your TSG effective, remember, the cell will still die. The cell will still die. Kaya nga, when we talk about the oncogene, it is not the actual, part of the DNA that will cause the cancer, but the deactivation of the TSG. Clear tayo doon? Kasi kaya pang i-activate ang TSG eh. Kaya nga, question, will the oncogene, once mutated, can lead to cancer? The answer is no. Clear? The answer is no. Pero every time that there's an oncogene associated in any risk factors, tandaan mo, there's always association with cancer. Clear? Because the BRCA1 and BRCA2 are cancer genes. Clear? So parang ganito. The oncogene will not lead for the development of cancer. But every time that there's a presence of BRCA1, BRCA2, there's always a problem. Pero hindi naman siya ang nagsisimula ng problema. It's actually the TSG that will create the problem. Clear? Ganito na lang yan. Let's put it this way. Diba sometimes, when you were in the school before, sometimes you will be seeing one of your duty mates, na parang wala naman siyang problem. It's just that every time ka-duty mo siya, palaging may problemang dumadating sa inyo. Lagi mo siyang sinisisi pero hindi naman siya talaga may problema. 'Di ba? Parang ganun lang. Example, may ka-duty ka sa ER. 'Di ba? Every time naka-duty mo tong nurse na to, ang dami mong pasyente palagi, pero hindi naman siya talaga may kasalanan. Parang ganun. Para siya may balat sa puwet, char, sabi ni ano. Correct. So every time there's the presence of your oncogene, there's always dilubyo. Pero hindi siya ang nagkakos ng problem. Sino ang nagkakos ng problem? Si TSG deactivation. Si TSG deactivation. Clear tayo doon? Yes. Kaya nga, it's just a risk. Every time there's a presence of oncogene, there might be a problem that might arise. But it's not technically the one causing the problem. Hindi siya talaga ang nagkakos ng problem. But the TSG deactivation. Clear tayo doon? Clear. Kaya nga ba sa BRCA1, BRCA2, may risk ka lang kasi may problema. Clear. Now question. What if the TSG will be the one to be deactivated? Tinan mo ha. For example, etong TSG mo, naging letter C to. Do you think the TSG can still function its can still do its function?
No.
Once this becomes now faulty pairing, pag naging faulty ang TSG mo, remember, once the TSG becomes interrupted because it changes its code, it undergone faulty pairing, ibig sabihin, madi-deactivate natin to, mai-interrupt natin to. What will happen to the lysosome? Wala nang lysosomal bursting. Kaya, whenever that you have now a problem with TSG, remember, cancer will arise. The cell will not die. Pag ang cell mo hindi na nag-die, hindi na namatay, what will happen? It will just multiply and regenerate. Clear? Clear po tayo doon? So, what is the main problem? Is it the oncogene or the TSG? It's the TSG. Okay? Not the oncogene. Clear? Risk lang si oncogene, but not causing the actual problem. Clear? Yun ba yun, Hela Cell? Hindi po. Okay. So, yung ating sinasabi dito, yung TSG, siya po yung talagang nakakakos ng ano natin, ng lysosomal bursting. So, as much as possible, we would want the TSG to be kept safe and to always be there. Kaso, ang problem natin, as time goes by, as our body tears down, the problem will be that our TSG would now be decreasing by its number. Kaya ang problem natin doon, there might be some associated problems when you get or when you reach more than 50. Yes, mas maganda yung cell death na lang. So for example, nagkaroon ka ng ganito. Every time that you are using shampoo that has formaldehyde or irritants, you know what will happen? Sometimes you develop dandruff. Be happy that your cells die and you are having the dandruff. Because that simply means one thing. Namamatay yung mga cells, that's why it desquamates. Kaya natatanggal. But what if the TSG of that cell, has become affected? Ang problem, the cell will not die. Hindi ka na magdadandruff. And then, what you're going to notice now is that there would now be abnormal, lump or node that will be created there. Hindi na mamatay, lumalaki na lang. There would now be the development of abnormal shape and mass. Instead na nagdandruff ka, namatay sana yung mga cells sa skin, ano nangyari? Hindi na siya namatay, nagdevelop na lang ng mga abnormal shape and mass and lumps, di ba? Okay. Sir, nalito po ako. Paano po ma-activate si TSG kapag faulty si oncogene? Guys, remember, when your oncogene becomes faulty, tatandaan mo, the oncogene cannot take its role anymore, cannot function its role anymore. The thing na hindi siya nakapag-function ng function niya is already an abnormality inside the cell. Diba? Supposed to be the oncogene can actually activate abnormality. Kaso, ano nangyari kay oncogene? Hindi niya na na-activate yung abnormality. So, nararamdaman ng katawan that there's something wrong with the mechanism because the oncogene supposed to will be creating abnormal cells if something is wrong inside the cell. Kaso, hindi niya na nga magawa yun. So what happens now? It goes back to the brain. Brain, there's something wrong with the mechanism. What you want me to do? Oh no. Okay, please activate the second defense, TSG. Clear? Clear po ba? Oh, kaya kapag naging faulty si oncogene, hindi niya na magagawan ng role, hindi niya na magagampanan yung role niya. And that itself is already an abnormality inside the cell. Clear tayo doon? O kaya na-activate pa rin si TSG. Kasi there's the presence of abnormality. Clear? Yes? Sige.